In a culture that worships winners, some people say that the church is a place for losers. And they're right. This is a place for losers. This is a place for people who have lost their hair, lost their teeth, lost their place, lost their memories, lost their savings, lost their jobs. It's a place for people who have lost their parents, lost the love of their life, even who have lost their children. This is a place for people who have lost their way, lost their faith, or lost their hope. This is a place for imperfect, broken, lost, messy people. It's a place for us. Let's look and see who we are and how we are, how much we need and can help one another. Come, let us worship together.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Berkeley. My name is Karen Elliott. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the worship associate for today's service. If this is your first time here, we're so glad you've come. This is a welcoming congregation, and we are always working on how to better welcome and care for one another. Whoever you are, we welcome you in the fullness of who you are. As we begin, we take this moment to acknowledge that this church occupies unceded Chochenyo and Muwekma Ohlone land. As community and church members, we continue to benefit from the seizure and occupation of this land. We also want to affirm this is not simply performative, but is deeply felt and is a commitment toward action. For more information, please visit uucb.org/indigenous. Now, please take a moment to prepare yourself and your space for our time together. You might get a candle and a way to light it, so that you can join in the chalice lighting at home. Let us kindle our flames with the words of Atticus Palmer. We call this light before us in hope that we may always remain a strong community, working together to make the world a better place. When we are grieving or sad, when we are challenged, when we need help, this flame guides us out of the darkness. When we are cheerful, when we celebrate, when we accomplish a great task, when we return to a place that makes us happy, the chalice reminds us to share our happiness with others. I now invite you to share in the comments where you are by writing, "I carry the flame in," whatever town or city you are watching us from today. And now, please join us in singing our opening song, "For All That Is Our Life." The words will be on screen. Thank you.
For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. For needs which
Please join with me in saying our covenant. Love guides this church. The quest for truth and justice is its common purpose. To give thanks, listen deeply, speak with care, honor our differences, and seek and grant forgiveness. These things we covenant with one another.
May we have safe passage, oh, safe passage. May we have safe passage, oh, safe passage on our way. Safe passage on your way, brother. Safe passage on your way, sister. Safe passage on your way, sweet children. Safe passage on our way. May we have safe passage. Oh, safe passage. May we have safe passage. Oh, safe passage on our way. May we have safe passage, oh, safe passage. May we have safe passage, oh, safe passage on our way. Safe passage on our way, brother. Safe passage on your way, sister. Safe passage on your way, sweet children. Safe passage on our way. May we have safe passage, oh, safe passage. May we have safe passage, oh, safe passage on our way.
Good morning. I'm the Reverend Catherine Boyle. My pronouns are she, hers, hers. And today I'm back with another Black UU historical figure for this month's Time for All Ages. And the person I'm talking about today is the Reverend Lewis Allen Mcgee. With this, let's begin. This comes from the UU White Supremacy Teaching Series. It was 1943, in the middle of the Second World War. Chaplain Lewis Mcgee, a minister in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, son of a man who had once been a slave, lay in his army cot in Belgium, listening to the sound of bombers flying overhead. He was struggling with his faith and thinking about his life. For more than 20 years, he had served small African Methodist Episcopal, AME for short, congregations in West Virginia and Ohio, all while questioning the doctrines of his church. He was curious about the discoveries of science and believed human reason had an important role to play in faith. And he believed that human beings, not an all-powerful God, had to do the work of solving human problems, including bringing justice and equality to Black people. He had discovered a long time ago that he was humanist Unitarian. He had also discovered that Unitarian congregation, which were made mostly of white people, would not accept the leadership of a Black minister. He had been told that if he wanted to be a Unitarian minister, he'd have to gather his own congregation. As he lay awake thinking about all of this in the middle of a war, he came to a resolution. He had not hesitated to volunteer for the army at the age of 50 and risk his life. Why should he not go home after the war and give his life to what he believed in? After he returned home at the end of the war, Lewis Mcgee made some big changes. He married Marcella Walker, daughter of a well-to-do Chicago African-American family, and he also entered Meadville Theological School, to begin his studies for the Unitarian ministry. North American Unitarian leaders knew about Louis Mcgee. He had been part of humanist groups for a long time and was on the governing board of the American Humanist Association, all while serving as an AME minister. What they did not know was how to convince a white congregation to call him as their minister. After graduation, Louis and Marcella charted a bold new course. Convinced that there was a hunger for liberal religion and for Unitarianism among the Black people on Chicago's South Side, they started the Free Religious Fellowship and began to gather a congregation. Thus, Louis and Marcella were well liked, and Marcella had a lot of connections in Chicago. She was able to help get the word out, and they grew a congregation that grew to nearly 100 members. The members who had gathered for the simple Sunday service were mostly Black people, though a few were white and some were Japanese. The Free Religious Fellowship was supported and encouraged by other Unitarian leaders in Chicago and in the national organization. After a few years, it was time for Louis to move on to a new challenge. He impressed the Unitarians of Flint, Michigan, where he preached for them in early 1957. But when it came time to call them as him as their minister, he did not get the necessary 2/3 of the vote. Although that there were 5 Black families in the congregation at that time, some white members felt that they were not ready for a Black minister. 2 years later, Mcgee became assistant minister at the First Unitarian Church of Los Angeles, one of 2 of Black ministers called to minister to largely white congregations that year. Finally, in 1963, 40 years after he decided he wanted to become a Unitarian minister, Mcgee became the minister of the Chico Unitarian Fellowship in 1961, the first Black man called as the senior minister of a mostly white Unitarian church, 1961, not all that long ago. When Louis Mcgee decided that he would wait no longer for the Unitarians to make room for his ministry, he made his own room in our denomination's history. We honor his memory and place among our UU ancestors.
Our focus on community this month, with its highlight on Black history and culture, has been invigorating for me. I've been nourished listening to Reverend Michelle's reflections, to the music, and to the many voices from our own congregation. And I've been thinking about how communities come into being. I was particularly moved last Sunday at Personal Theology, hearing Helen Tinsley Jones and Julia Rogers tell about their own spiritual journeys and the founding of the People of Color Caucus and the Whites Opposing White Supremacy group here. Helen's courageous sharing about the ever-present threat of aggression Blacks face in white society, and how she emerged nevertheless into feeling beloved community here at UUCB, was especially powerful to me. Equally inspiring was Helen's and Julia's story of coming together as sisters to create the two caucuses, safe places to explore the complexity of racism and white privilege at UUCB. I felt humbled by their wisdom and depth of struggle and love. The same weekend, I was reading a compelling book and watching a stirring documentary. The book is Eddie Hillison's Diaries, written in the early 1940s by a young Dutch Jewish woman living in Amsterdam under the Nazi occupation. Eddie was a bright, self-reflective intellectual, a spiritual student, and intimate friend of a Jungian psychoanalyst. Her diaries reveal a remarkable psychological and spiritual growth, a transformation, really, during the persecution that culminated in the Westerbork transit camp and weekly transports to Auschwitz. Rather than go into hiding, Eddie voluntarily entered the camp, choosing to join the suffering community and help where she could, giving of the energy generated by her life-affirming beliefs. She died in Auschwitz. The documentary is The Black Church. This is our story. This is our song. Through beautifully curated video footage, music, photographs, and spoken word, the story of 4+ centuries of the Black Church in America is presented to our national audience. I was so affected by it, by the way the survivors of the Middle Passage and their enslaved descendants created a community, taking what they still had within them and then what they found surrounding them, and making a faith world for themselves that could nourish and uphold them through tremendous oppression and even become a redemptive social force for the nation. Some of you know that I also attend a Black Pentecostal church. 8 years ago, that small congregation made me welcome when I arrived in great need of spiritual sustenance. It was a breakthrough church for me, giving me a place for my grief and yearning, pouring God's love over me and over everyone there, and harnessing my own love of rhythm and song to praise and prayer. I can testify to the power of the Black Church. It has been a profound spiritual source for me. And UUCB is my sacred community path. I'm so grateful to be here with you all, working to be in covenant together, making our faith community a place for love and growth and social and racial justice. Onward.
We now enter a time in our service that we make for our hearts and our spirits, for the tender places within us. During this time, we lift up and hold the joys, the sorrows, the challenges, and the concerns that we may each be facing. During our time of silence this morning, I invite you to share joys, sorrows, or significant milestones of your own in the comments section. I invite us all to hold these cares in the compassionate embrace of this loving community. I invite you now to join in the spirit of meditation. You may want to put your feet flat on the floor. Close your eyes if you wish. Slowly take in a nice deep breath and gently release it, releasing some of the stress and worries of your week and of the time that we're in, releasing those worries, even if just for a moment. I invite us to join in a time of wondering together. I wonder if the river ever despairs of its downward destiny and harbors a secret desire to flow up. I wonder if winter yearns to be summer, or if a flower wishes it could bloom out of season. I wonder if silence would like to shout, or if the sky wants to fall down and merge with and become the earth. I wonder if the bird longs to become a rabbit, or the fish dreams of walking on land. I wonder if mountains envy valleys, or if snow secretly covets the warmth of June. I wonder if the moon complains it is not the sun, or the stars envy all they see around them that is different. I wonder if rain prefers a cloudless sky, or if grass tires of green and hopes one day to be blue. I wonder if spring likes growing or fall rages against its colors and dryness. I wonder if the world ever sighs more than it is, more than we do as we do. I wonder because we so struggle against our limitations. May we instead learn to find ways to accept them and accept us as who we are. Now let us join in singing our meditative hymn this week, Winds Be Still. The words will be on screen.
Winds be still, storm clouds pass and silence come. Peace grace this time with harmony. Fly, bird of hope, and shine, light of love, and in calm light or distant view, help us to sense life's mystery. Fly high and far, and lead us each to see how we move through the winds of eternity. Light shining, illuminate our inward view. Help us to see with clarity. Shine bright and true, so we may join our songs in new songs that become full symphony.
When I was with the Faithful Fools Street Ministry, we did a good bit with clown noses and clowning. But years before that, I actually spent a couple of years working as a professional clown. Now, you wouldn't know that if you looked at my resume. My resume says photographer, not clown. But I can assure you the majority of what I did was clowning. And since I was making a financial commission for the day, it was technically professional work. I spent those 2 years working for Owen Mills Church Directories as a photographer. It was actually a rather weird model that they used, at least at the time. What we did is we had a very specific set of photographs that we would take of each individual or family that walked through the door. If they were an individual, I had 5 very specific poses I would put them in. A couple got 4 poses together and then 2 shots each separately. A family also had a prescribed set. How they sat, what they sat on, what you put their feet on, how their shoulders were and their necks, their heads, their hands, every little angle and position. You get the idea. It was all carefully scripted out and prescribed. And then I just added my personality and antics in the hopes they would enjoy the experience and order some pictures, because all I got paid on was commission. So for me, it was really, once you got the prescribed set of pictures down, it was clowning. But the pictures, they all ended up looking the exact same. And I was graded, literally graded and scored on how close my work came to those standards. It was like there was a perfect photograph, and all I was trying to do was reach that perfect picture with every person who got in front of my camera. And as hard as I tried, I never could get a perfect score. But maybe that doesn't matter. I'm pleased to say that instead I was, and I could say this truthfully, I was the 3rd best-selling photographer in the country 1 quarter. Forget perfection, it's all about clowning. Because of course, this perfection doesn't exist. And even if we might be able to make something appear perfectly for a split second in a carefully controlled situation, it's still just a picture of normal people with complex families and lives with varying degrees of messiness. The perfect family photo is just as much a myth as the perfect family. And, we have some rather mythical ideas about communities, too. Quaker theologian Parker Palmer has quite a bit to say about community and about finding what he calls true communities. True communities that actually work, ones that nurture their members and make a difference in the world. But, when we try to picture them, a lot of extra ideas and myths can start to get in our way. Okay, the myths. These are fun. One of the most pervasive of these myths comes from when we look at communities in terms of individuals and what we get out of it, the consumerist type of mentality. Now, This is a myth that is deeply embedded in our theological history, holding up the importance of the individual and their beliefs. It's right there in our theological history. And I admit I'm not immune to this myth myself. Back when I was evaluating what seminaries to apply for my master's degree in, and then recently when I was also applying to doctoral programs, this was entirely the frame I was looking through. What were the benefits I would get out of the program? What features did the program offer me? How did the staff and the school treat me? Did I like the other students I met? What kind of a hat was I going to get at graduation? And so on. Now, I'm not saying this is the wrong way to look at whether to choose a school to attend, but it probably contributed to my surprise when I got there and realized that there was this community thing there too, and a lot of effort that went into building it. Now, when I went to seminary for my master's, I was going to seminary here in Berkeley. But since I was living on the other side of the bay in San Francisco at the time and didn't really make being an active part of the community a priority, I never did really connect with it. The community and the school remained mostly a consumer mentality for me, but there was definitely a community there. And it often baffled me how connected other folks were to it. Community isn't just something that one subscribes to, boiled down to a list of the rights and benefits for being there. Although I admit sometimes I'm afraid that's what membership in UU congregations feels like when we present it. It's not just that list of rights and benefits. Parker Palmer reminds us instead that true community comes as a byproduct of commitment and struggle. It's not by accident, he says, that the most impressive sense of community is found amongst people in the midst of joyful travail, amongst Blacks, amongst women, amongst all who have said no to tyranny with the yes of their lives. Shared struggle, shared triumphs, shared failures. These are what build community more than anything else. Co-created stories and co-engaged struggles. But even with this in mind, and even with us knowing this, the consumerist and individualistic mentality is probably still the hardest myth to challenge. How much of our capitalistic society is built around the individual and individual needs? And how much of this is ingrained in the way that we think, keeping our focus on how best to get our own needs met? And not only basic needs like food, water, and shelter, but all of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It can be so easy to only keep one's own perspective in mind. Now, in case you're thinking ahead that I'm going to try to say it's the group's needs above the individual's, I'm not saying that either. Because in a true community, the individual doesn't supersede the group, but likewise, the group doesn't supersede the individual. The needs of both are just as important, and we can get to truth through both of them. They balance each other. In a well-functioning community, the group helps to balance the needs and egos of its members, but also the voices of the individuals and the contributions of individuals complement and challenge the group. The group balances the lives of its members, and the voices of individual members challenge and inspire the group. It goes both ways. A diversity of voices and a diversity of opinions make a community stronger and every decision more solid. The University of Virginia did some interesting studies on dissenting voices on juries. What they found was that a single dissenting voice, a single voice with the courage to speak up and challenge the prevailing opinion, that just having this voice resulted in more information being considered and a greater number of perspectives being in the room. And that's just an isolated group brought together for only one moment who didn't know each other before getting into that room together. Think of what diversity can do in our communities. communities that are far more long-lasting, growing and learning and changing over time. Communities are stronger because of their individual members. And communities grow stronger by going through struggles and challenges together. Okay, back to the myths. Again, myths are fun. We got some other myths we face too. Another particularly pervasive myth is the idea that a true community being some kind of utopia. Just like that perfect family photo setup, if we were to imagine what a perfect community might look like, I bet we'd have a number of these utopian features in it. Sure, they're ideal, but ultimately they're unrealistic, which is why when I see lists of these and being, isn't that the perfect UU community? I tend to name that UU community the unicorn UU community. I love unicorns, but again, it's a myth. And I've probably spent more time than average looking into intentional communities and ones that look like utopian communities, reading books and websites about them. Okay, even reading organizational documents for utopian communities. I'm a geek that way. I've always been fascinated by intentional communities. I even lived in one for about 3 months during summer as an undergrad. So I admit I was completely excited to find a universalist intentional community that actually existed back in the 1800s. The community of Hopedale in Massachusetts was founded in 1842 by Aidan Ballou, nephew of the well-known Universalist minister, Hosea Ballou. This community was revolutionary in many ways. Property was held jointly, labor was shared, even women's rights were emphasized. All women had a vote and some had leadership roles. In 1842, the problem was that the community ultimately wasn't sustainable. In fact, it only lasted 14 years before it went under because some of its initial financial backers stepped out. For all of its absolutely fabulous ideals, it wasn't a practically sustainable model. And I admit to my overly romantic view and utopian view of communities, and there are some very real dangers inherent in that. If we come into a particular community with idealistic assumptions about what that community will do or will be, particularly if we are experiencing these things when we come in, we are setting ourselves up to be disappointed or even crushed the first time the community lets us down. Then that can lead to disillusionment that can just destroy our relationship with the community in the first place. Just think to a time when a community, perhaps this community, hasn't met a particular expectation you've had. This happens to all of us in all of our communities. Now, I imagine you were disappointed, but if you truly believed this was what community should do or should be and nothing else was possible, it could have been devastating for you. It was hard to hear the fate of Hopedale. It sounded like such a neat community with awesome ideals, the relationship, the equity, the cooperation. It should have worked, right? We can really get caught up in all of those shoulds and tie up all of our assumptions and hopes without a grounding in what is sustainable. Now, there's another myth that Unitarian Universalists are particularly grappling with right now. It's the myth that just because we're preaching something means we're automatically practicing it too. Or to put it more sharply, the do-gooders who don't bother to take a look at themselves. We talked about this a couple weeks ago when we talked about UU Black history. UUs have a long and rocky history with regards to Black empowerment and white supremacy right in our own movement. We love to hold up our heroes who stood up against hate in the civil rights movement and our courageous members and leaders who stand up against it now. But we don't have it figured out, not by a long shot, both within our congregations, and we are still so working on it nationally. I hear many well-intentioned folks coming down all over on these issues, and I've seen the struggles, heartfelt, vulnerable struggles, as folks have pushed themselves grappling with the issues of white supremacy and institutional racism right here within our walls. But we have a long ways to go, and we can't let ourselves fall back into the myth of believing we have it figured out just because we're fighting for it out in the world. And now, before I share our final big myth for today, I want to briefly share about a couple of other myths that can run around internal to the congregations. Okay, get ready for these. They're probably going to hit home. One of them is that there is one best way to do things. I think places like here, we well know there may be best ways of doing things, and that what matters is respecting all the voices in the process. One best way, but then that gets into being one of the only way. And, of course, that one best way is the way we've always been doing things. Another myth I've run into is that some groups are better than others. Some of the ways of doing our groups is better than others. And I've learned time and time again, this one is a myth. Different types of groups meet different needs for folks, both long-standing groups and brand new ones, newcomers and longer-term members alike. I love seeing the diversity of groups. It is certainly one of our strengths here. And then there's the myth. This is the size myth with congregations. Some sizes of congregations are better than others. Well-known megachurch pastor Andy Stanley didn't do this one any good when he privileged enormously huge churches over small ones in a well-publicized speech. He retracted statements after small churches across the country countered him. And by the way, when I mean small, I'm meaning smaller than 10,000. So that pretty much means virtually all of us. It isn't that some sizes are better than others. It isn't that only the enormous ones have it all figured out. Small can make just as good as a congregation that's bigger. Any size can be absolutely the right thing for folks. Now, don't get me wrong. I love Unitarian Universalism and want everyone who may be able to need it to hear about it and experience the welcoming and loving places like the one we have here. But it's not about the numbers. It's because of the difference we can make in someone's life. Okay, last myth. I've got a super fancy, highly technical name for it. You ready for it? Here's the myth. It's called the "we figured out what's working now and we expect it'll work tomorrow too" myth. You like that one? Like I told you, highly technical name. We figured out what's working and we expect it'll work tomorrow too. Yeah. This is a dangerous myth, possibly the most dangerous out there. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever heard of Rakow, Poland? Anyone? I'm guessing probably not. Okay, so Rakow, Poland, it was a holy Unitarian community in Poland. It was founded mid-16th century by a Polish nobleman as a center for religious tolerance, and Unitarianism thrived there. Okay, it thrived there for a little while. Now, it actually was a real hotbed of forward thinking and had a well-known printing press, published a good amount of Unitarian educational materials, and what's known as the Rakowian Catechism, a published non-Trinitarian statement of faith, which was pretty radical for the 16th century. But as forward-thinking as they were, as forward-thinking and as much as they really had it going on right, they failed to pay attention to what was happening around them. As the Counter-Reformation grew in Europe, the challenges against the tolerance present in Rakow grew. The tipping point came when two boys in Rakow, so what happened? Let me go back a bit. The counter-reformationists who were opposed to the tolerance in Raquel started erecting crosses around town. And the alleged story is that 2 boys in Raquel were throwing rocks at a group of these crosses. In the ensuing aftermath that you can expect happened, the Unitarians in Raquel and the rest of Poland were wiped out. Aside from a few surviving publications from their famous press, there are no remnants of Raquel left today. Of all the myths about communities, this is the one that worries me the most. What are we missing? What are we holding on to that won't work for us tomorrow? We can't just hold on to the fact that UUs have been the vanguard of liberal thought. Were 40 years ago, and that edge will keep us going. It's no secret that church membership and church attendance are declining all over the place. The number of folks unaffiliated with a religious tradition of any sort is increasing. Church memberships are decreasing. We talked about this last week a bit. 1/3 of adults under the age of 30 claim no religious affiliation of any sort. And only 2 in 10 millennials believe that going to church is important. 2 in 10. I don't have to look much further than my own family to confirm these numbers. Out of 5 of us kids, all of us raised going to church every single week, all of us raised with the importance of being religious and churched, out of 5, only 1 has any sort of church affiliation today. Me, just 1. The rest would certainly be known as what are called nuns, those with no religious affiliation. The world is changing. This is the reality. But institutions are often slow to catch up. This is also the reality. Changes to the religious landscape are all around us. Changes of every kind surround us. I could have said this 2 years ago, and it's even more true now. I'm afraid that we'll miss it if we spend too much time and energy on only what worked for us yesterday. And that's something I am desperately afraid of for our faith. I don't know about you. But true community, perfect community, messy community, whatever it is, there is only one choice, and that is imperfect community. I will choose messy and imperfect, loving, that is willing to go forward and mess up and just stay there with each other. May we all realize the myths that we are holding on to. And may we also find the love and the courage and the perseverance that we need to keep building our imperfect, beloved communities. May it be so.
Hello, my name is Sheldon Jones. My wife Helen and I have been coming to UUCB since 2015. Today, I'd like to talk to you about why someone such as myself is involved in pledging in the Stewardship Campaign. I sought out UUCB initially as a place to work for social justice. I've found so much more. Without UUCB, I would still be going to actions, forums, meetings, but they would not be in a sense of community. And community these days is as rare as it is precious and beautiful, as well as sustaining. So please, pledge in order that UUCB's sense of community grows and becomes, to many more people, a place where they can do life's work in the company of friends. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Pierre, and this is my daughter, Melinda.
Hi.
The Family Ministry Program is what I really love about UUCB. It was a wonderful support to me when I first became a mom. Members came and dropped off food. I got a ton of valuable advice and validation from the parent support group. when Melinda was a baby. And the RE program is wonderful. I both teach RE and my children attend. And Melinda's been through the OWL program. It's been a great introduction and reinforcement of our values. And for me personally, it's a good jumping off point for talking about complicated issues with my kids, like social justice and human sexuality. Linda, what do you miss most about church?
Well, like there's this Easter egg hunt where we could find Easter eggs, and that was pretty fun. And there's also the Christmas thing where there was like a table that had lots of yummy cookies on it. And then there's also the candle lighting thing where we had like candles, and there were all candles at the front. And also there was like one time we did a thing where we lit the candle from another person's candle.
Yes, so these wonderful programs all survive and thrive through your generous financial contribution, as well as your contributions of time and energy. Thanks.
UUCB continues to need your gifts and support as we commit together to making ours a vibrant, loving community that inspires spiritual growth, social justice work, and lives of integrity and service. We're especially grateful for your generosity with our Good Neighbor organizations. This month, we're sharing half of our offerings with Collaborizing to support the good work they do in our wider community. Collaborizing is dedicated to improving race equity by facilitating community conversations on race. Their goal is to build cross-cultural relationships between racialized groups who typically compete for limited financial and social resources and currently view one another as opponents rather than collaborators. One of their ongoing programs is a community gardening project on the Richmond Greenway. Offerings of any value are received with gratitude. More details on how to give electronically will appear on your screen as the offertory begins. Thank you. Please join me in dedicating our offering. We dedicate our offering and ourselves to the mission of this congregation, to create loving community, inspire spiritual growth, and encourage lives of integrity, joy, and service. It's been good to be together in worship today, even virtually. Before we shift to our Zoom coffee hour, may I encourage you to visit our website, uucb.org, and check out the many activities going on in our congregation despite the pandemic. There's a link in news to our weekly email newsletter, The Week Ahead, which contains good information about upcoming events and activities. I'd like to highlight 3 important announcements. Next Sunday at 9:20 a.m., Personal Theology will host the Reverend Dr. Dorsey O. Blake speaking on Returning Home. This should be powerful. Reverend Blake is the pastor of the Church for the Fellowship of All Peoples in San Francisco, founded by the renowned Howard Thurman, and he will explore how the concept of being led home has influenced his personal spiritual journey. The Zoom link will be in the week ahead. Also next Sunday, March 7th, we will officially launch our Stewardship Campaign for the fiscal year July 1, 2021 to June 30th, 2022. Our pledges help the church secure the financial resources needed to be the welcoming presence that it is in our lives and a safe place for us to gather. This year, we've felt the importance of the church in our upended lives, our health challenges, and financial stresses. We hope you'll be able to join in pledging whatever amount feels right. And finally, have you ever considered becoming a worship associate? I can vouch for how rewarding it is. We currently have openings and would welcome new team members. Please see the announcement in the week ahead with a link for more information. If you're interested, we hope you will contact Reverend Michelle or any of us WAs. And now, please join in singing our closing song, I Know I Can. The words will be on screen. Thank you.
The days be dark with storms, and burdens weigh my heart. The troubles wait at every turn. I know
True community is not only possible, true community is already here. We have been building it for years. That's a lot of work going into this community. But true community doesn't mean a perfect one. As Layla Ibrahim from the Oakland UU congregation reminds us, quote, "There is really only one choice between imperfect community and no community. Again and again, we are all called to choose to commit ourselves to building a more just, more diverse, and yet ever messy, beloved community." May we make this choice. May we make this choice over and over and move towards its potential together. Blessed be.